Hello everybody, it's me. I'm back. Back with a vengeance. A vengeance dedicated to creepypastas. And today, we're going to be reading a story called Touhou 11 Incident. Now, some of you might be wondering, what the heck is a Touhou? Well, it's not anything what you're thinking probably, but it's the very niche game series that I'm willing to bet nobody watching this has ever heard of. But that's okay. That's not too terribly important. It's something that's very important to me. A series that I really like. And not even it is safe from the terrible creepypastas. So let's just get reading. Once, an unnamed player torrented, oh, that's illegal, a copy of Touhou Subterranean Anonymism, I'm keeping that in, comma, a PC game. The player had played other Touhou Danmaku shooter games. You could have just said played other Touhou games, but gotta pad this out somehow. And especially loved Perfect Cherry Blossom. That's the 7th. By the way, there's 18 of these things. Yeah, I know. But still hadn't played anything past Phantasmagoria of Flower View, period. Touhou games were only sold in Japan, so for the player, comma, who lived in the UK, comma, it was impossible to buy, also, this is random, but UK, there's like a period, so after the U, and then after the K, and then there's a comma. I couldn't think of anything funny to say about it, but it's just kind of weird. It doesn't look right. It was impossible to find. Oh my gosh. It was impossible to buy a copy of any Touhou game without going online. Period. Therefore, they torrented any they could find. Period. I don't think that's a complete sentence. Oddly, feel free to correct me, but I'm pretty sure that's not a complete sentence. Oddly, comma, only one other person had downloaded the torrent the player was getting. Bum dum dum. The game started and nothing looked out of the ordinary, even though you've never played it before. With the start menu, there were the normal game start, comma, options, comma, exit, and other choices, and the practice start, and there's no commas. Extra start, no, that makes sense. We're still grayed out, comma, showing this was a fresh program, as opposed to all of those genetically engineered non-fresh programs. With nothing unlocked yet, period. The player decided to play as Reimu A on Kappa, in brackets, normal difficulty. You could have just said normal. You didn't. I mean, I know that's in the whatever. Because she was the player's favorite character. Her A power was based on Yukari. And yeah, this is all from the game, but this has nothing to do with from Perfect Cherry Blossom. And the player was wearing a red shirt at the time. And in brackets, Reimu's main color. And by the way, this shirt thing never comes up again in the story. I don't even know why it's brought up. As the game loaded the first stage, comma, there was a short sentence of Japanese text, but the player's knowledge of what it meant was very limited. Which probably means he had no knowledge, which you could have just said he didn't understand because he lived in the UK. The program wasn't patched to be in English yet, so the player didn't pay much attention to the text. The first stage began, comma, the background was a dark, comma, narrow tunnel with a light coming from the bottom. Period. The player did well and had no problems up to the first stage boss. The boss was a rather husky-looking woman. Husky? Husky? What does that mean? Husky. I don't know. A rather husky-looking woman with yellow orbs over her brown clothes, comma, definitely spider-based. Oh, you think? Oh, boy. Oddly, the boss was more difficult than the player expected. Period. A spider web appeared at times. That's what happens in the game. Let's get to the creepy part. Appeared at times, and the player passed over it. They got stuck for a few seconds. Leaving them vulnerable to attacks. Period. Regardless, the player finished the first stage with only one life lost, cheering for themselves after a job well done. And no, you lost a life, dingus. And skipping the voiceless text-based dialogue of Reimu supposedly talking to herself. To herself. Yeah, there's more of her. To herself. And in brackets, it happens in almost all the games. Okay. The second stage began loading with an odd text. An odd text, not a odd text, or just odd text. An odd text. Do you understand me now? Question mark, period. The text was in English, unlike most of the game text up to that point. Wow, really? Only the starting screen options were in English. The player went through the second stage as shown as a wide open and dimly slightly dimmed area with mossy rock walls. There was little challenge after the shock from the first boss, and the first boss isn't even that hard. However, when the second boss appeared, the player lost all joyful emotions just by the sight of her. A dark aura was emitted from her. Yeah, this bright on my screen is giving me a dark aura, guys. A dark aura was emitted from her that twisted the background. Oh, you monster. Her eyes... This is still just what happens in the game. Her eyes glowed green. And when she cast spells, a spinning pentagram would appear. There's probably footage of the game in the background right now, and future me, put some footage of a boss in there, please, but that's not a pentagram. I'm pretty sure that's, a pentagram's a star, no. Fine, yeah, there was a pentagram, ooh, let's just say it's spooky. Would appear behind her, she had curly blonde hair and had an odd Persian-style dress. She moved very oddly around the screens. Oh my gosh, I can't speak. And her spells were like nothing the player had seen before, and they're really not all that special, but okay. And she doesn't really even move all that oddly. She's about any other boss, but okay. Only one specific spell terrified the player. Oh my gosh! Terrified! That's a terrifying spell. What's so... But they didn't know the name of... As most of the dialogue and characters' spells were still in Japanese. It involved a cloud of green... Not green orbs! Anything but that! A cloud, no, it's gonna get worse. Chasing the player's character and leaving a trail of orbs. Oh my... That's terrifying, crowding the screen and making it harder to escape. While the stage boss stood there until damaged enough to begin the next spell. After struggling to beat this boss, the player was glad that this Touhou game was based on challenge more than other games of the series were, and loved the unique bullet patterns. Yeah. This is the... The third stage began with more text in English. Are you here to play with me? Question mark. The third stage background was a dark and lit town, only by small lanterns. The lanterns aren't that small, but okay. It was snowing slowly. Perfect. I'm leaving that in. Perfect cherry blossom. It was very calming to the player after the depressing previous stage. Yeah. Had to Depressing. The stage was much harder, and the boss seemed to be part of the stage. The boss fused itself with the stage. It was very impressive. Stupid. After the mid-stage encounter, you could have just said the mid-stage boss, but whatever. The boss seemed to take no damage from the player's attacks because it's a scripted sequence. Idiot. The boss was an Oni woman with long blonde hair and red eyes. She had a single horn on her head, in a dark blue translucent skirt with red highlights and chains on her arms. And yes, you're just describing the character from the game. She had no weapon, was only holding a sake dish. Period. Again, the dialogue was only in for some reason Japanese, and for some reason this is capitalized. I don't know why. It doesn't need to be capitalized. It wasn't the story. And the player only ignored it. Only when it was officially before it was unofficially the boss portion of the stage. But now, it's official. Okay? It's official. She was difficult to dodge. Sounds a lot like my ex. The player lost all their lives, but rather than use to continue, the player decided to get an English patch to hopefully better know what all the characters were saying, because I'm sure English will help you when you just suck at the game. When the player came back, the title screen was almost the same, except Reimu was frowning because you suck at the game on the character select period in almost every game. She smiled, and the player was certain she was the first. What? I can't read. And the player was almost certain she was the first time they played. When the player talked to the first boss, she was in fear, asking, "Have you come to harm me again?" And was scratched up a lot, but not bleeding. Glad you specified that. That's real important. The boss battle seemed to have glitched because the boss made no attempt to attack and didn't shoot a single bullet. All the boss did was move around the top of the screen, avoiding the player's attack, more so than the boss normally would. Players thought little of it because, yeah, that's not weird at all when you were complaining earlier about how hard it was, and just kept playing. Again, there was text before stage 2, but this time it said, I think she deserved it, 2, period. Perhaps the patch was poorly translated or an error was made while torrenting. Those darn torrents and their errors. On the second boss, the player realized during the dialogue Reimu wasn't talking to herself. All she said was, ... There's some dots. The only words that were visible were from an unknown person who later introduced herself, a way to spoil the story, and was labeled in the dialogue as Sealed Rose. That's not your name. That's your label. You don't get names. You get labels. You're not a person. The dialogue from Sealed Rose was odd and seemed to be asking for a response from Reimu, but all Reimu said was, "More dots, dot." The stage 2 boss came again, during which the infamous spelled name revealed as a Japanese text and then green-eyed invisible monster. The first part seemed like another mistake in the patch, seeing as it was still in hiragana, because, yeah, sure, I bet you don't even know what the heck a hiragana is. I barely know. Well, the second part was somewhat fitting, but the boss wasn't invisible during the spell unless it meant someone else with green eyes. Who cares? Who cares who had green eyes? The text before stage 3 this time said, "Why won't you speak?" Question mark. Period. I hate this. At this moment, the player thought that the text was from Sealed Rose and wanted to speak with the player, period. The third stage's background village was now burning, but instead of snow, there was ash falling from the sky, because that's edgy. After getting to the boss with fewer problems than the first attempt, Reimu said nothing, and the dialogue of Sealed Rose said, "Hello?" question mark. The player put on a headset and spoke into it, and a conversation began. How did you know that was gonna happen? That doesn't happen in. Okay. Becoming Reimu's text-based dialogue. Sealed Rose asked the player. I'm getting a bit lightheaded, guys. Asked the player why the player hadn't responded before, the player claimed they were unable to because they didn't put on the headset because, yeah, it's so obvious. Okay. Guys, we aren't even halfway through. This is some way made Seal Rose sad as she didn't believe the player and must have daddy issues and thought that they didn't want to talk with her, which I wouldn't either. Thinking the player lied, Seal Rose acted very hostile towards the player for the rest of the dialogue, refusing to calm down and stop talking with the player. The player kept talking into their microphone, trying to apologize to Seal Rose, which I don't know why you would. It isn't real. The Stage 3 boss interrupted, believing the player to be crazy, talking to no one but themselves, and began attacking. Because that's what you do when you see a crazy person on the street. No, you don't call for help. You just attack them. This time the player knew how to beat the boss by not making as many mistakes as last time and did much better, this time beating the Oni boss with only 2 lives lost and 1 gain from past levels. Really crucial information. Story can go on without it. The player found it very odd how the game actually responded to the player's voice, which, yeah, that's pretty odd. It wasn't like Clever Bot where it would make sense half the time or record voice into text incorrectly. Whatever the player said was written perfectly, and while Seal Rose responded very hostile, it was as if she understood it all. Wow, not even highly funded games had mastered player voice mechanics, and Touhou was an indie made by one person. Perhaps more happened in Touhou 10 than the player thought, and indie games often do find huge this guy's an idiot. Indie games often do find huge advancements in gaming by just the passions of one idea. Still, the player was frightened by how different this game was from the last one. And no, it's exactly the same, except now you can talk to digital women. Even Flower View didn't change things up this much, and it actually changed more. Stage 4 began loading and said, "Don't go just yet, period." It wasn't perfectly clear if the messages were from Sealed Rose anymore, The last time the player spoke to her, she seemed upset and wanted nothing to do with the player. Stage 4 began with a bird's-eye view of the floor pattern with red and blue eyes. Oh, boy. All of which appeared to stare directly at the player. A devilish-sounding cat meow was heard, sending a shiver up the player's spine. Period. A black cat with a flaming silhouette and a spinning it's not a pentagram behind it. Flew into the screen. It flew into the screen. It was already outside the game. It went inside. It's crazy. And began attacking. Unlike Persian Girls pentagram, the cat's pentagram didn't disappear when the cat was casting spells. The cat was casting spells into the pentagram. Player just barely avoided the attacks. They wanted to pause for a moment to calm their nerves, but the escape key wasn't responding. Instead, the player kept reaching for their own spells more frequently just to stay alive. The cat kept meowing every 20 seconds, causing the player to shiver. Oh my gosh, terrifying. and make more mistakes. The player felt they would have a heart attack and just wanted the battle to end. Well, there's a fun little thing on your computer called the power button. Eventually, the cat did run off when it had run out of spells for the stage, and the player started to calm down, fighting only weak enemies until they reached the last boss. The boss was a young-looking girl, which isn't very descriptive because every character in Touhou is a young girl who wore a pink flowery skirt and a light blue shirt. Hey, that rhymed. Comma. And her hair was short and purple. Yes, you're describing what the character looks like! Hair was short and purple, like her eyes. The boss mostly looked human, except for the red third eye hanging on tubes connected to many parts of her body with an indifferent stare and monotone voice. How do you know? Because the game doesn't, it doesn't, whatever. She spoke to the player, you must leave now. The name wasn't shown yet, but the player assumed this was Sealed Rose. Again, Reimu said her blank. What? Again, Reimu said her blank. What does that mean? Allowing the player to speak. Oh, I guess. Okay, she said nothing. Allowing the player to speak with the boss. Dialogue went on for a minute, over which the girl seemed to answer questions the player was about to ask, but didn't explain much of what was going on. The player then said, leave. Are we not going to know what questions they were? Are we not going to. Okay. Leave now and do not play again. She is tormented enough. Player questioned more, but continued to get very little information. The girl demanded the player to stop immediately, or she would be forced to fight. The player played for the boss to let them through, and even referred to them as Sealed Rose. The boss said they didn't know anyone named Sealed Rose. I am Satori Komiji, mistress of the Palace of the Earth Spirits. Oh, yeah, that's her name. I get it. No one cares. The fight began. Satori began with simple attacks with transparent red and blue orbs that overlap and became purple because that's how colors work. Nothing special, but looked like something another boss from a different game would use. When she cast her first spell, titled Bounded Field Mesh of Light, and what does that even mean? Mesh of is that even in the game? I don't think so. Comment. It was very familiar and looked similar to her transparent orb attack. Satori fired 2 clouds of bullets to the side of the player, one cloud red and the other blue with lasers coming from the trails aimed at the center. Not long after, a purple cloud was fired straight at the player. Not a cloud! Oh my gosh, how are they gonna get out of this one? It was fired straight at the player. Also with lasers coming from the... Yeah, I already read that. Unfortunately, the player was just thinking Satori would add this to the attack and knew how to dodge it. The next attack was made up of lasers that would aim where the player was. The next spell began as a stream of bullets from the right, causing the player to move to the empty left, like the Democrats. Nobody votes. It's a joke, by the way. Player felt like they had dodged this spell before in a different game and quickly moved to the right, went to the right, oh my gosh, went to the right because Reimu was a Democrat. She wore red. And he wore red too. He wore a red shirt. What was I doing? Oh yeah, suddenly a large cone of laser swept over from the left. Oh, is it an ice cream cone? Making the wave the bullets to the right much safer and forcing the player to move faster through them. Faster through them than what would have been safer. Okay. Player recognized the spell as someone else's. It was a spell from Perfect Cherry Blossom the player remembered during the laser attack. Oh. It was even the name was the same. It was Yuyuko's Lost Souls Village. Oh my gosh. Somebody did. Oh. The battle went on. Satori cast harder and harder spells from previous games, each one reminding the player of more terrifying spells that came up later in the battle. Oh my gosh. Player knew how to beat mostly spells, but was slowed down because of the shock period after having to cast spells just to survive the cat. The player had no chance to do the damage needed to stop spells. Most were being stopped by the timer that automatically started. Where was I? Oh, the next spell. Even after Satori's health was finally all gone, she cast Moku's Resurrection, bringing it all back. Satori even cast Green-Eyed Invisible Monster with the kanji, something I can't read before the spell. Eventually, the player understood that Satori was reading their mind, because that's the logical conclusion. Oh my gosh, the game is reading my mind! And that's an ability she has in the lore, in like the plot, but okay. And recreating spells from their memory, because that's how memory works. The player then focused their thoughts to only think of easy bosses and their easiest spells. The bullet patterns were then very spread out and no challenge to dodge, period. When Satori mimicked the first boss's evasive glitched movement, the player stopped, refusing to continue fighting. The player eventually won by simply waiting for the timer to end. Oh, wow. The player felt that to be the final stage. The rest of the bosses was too short. The bosses seemingly go on forever, and an overall feeling of helplessness. This video game is making me feel helpless. I think you have bigger problems if a game is making you feel helpless. Period. But of course, there was still 2 more stages before the game was over in any Touhou game. The pause button still didn't work, and the player was very curious as to what was going on with the game. The player felt they should stop now, but since that was a smart thing to do, the player didn't do it. I mean, they knew something evil was working in the game, and they felt they were the only one who could stop it, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's a video game! Text appeared as Stage 5 loaded. Suffer as I did, period. And at this point, the player had no clue who was sending these messages. It was probably the game. Sealed Rose had stopped talking during the in-game dialogue, and the only one who the game remembers suffering greatly was the first boss. Or maybe it's Satori. I'm yawning a lot. Because it's really stupid. A player heard the breeze of wind in the headset and felt an equally chilling breeze against their skin. Okay. The background of Stage 5 was a dark, red, lifeless field patches. That's what the... Kill me now. Lifeless field with patches of fire dimly lighting small areas. There was no grass and no animals moving or dead could be seen. I'm getting lightheaded again. Whatever, I'll be fine. If I die uploading this video, just know that upload it even when I'm dead. Where was I? I don't even know anymore. Story's stupid. I'm not cutting this out, by the way. I'm too lazy. Oh, there was no grass. Yeah, no grass, no animals moving or dead could be seen, period. Black iron fences, gates and walls decorated the scenery. Wow, what great scenery. The player heard murmurs from white ghosts that flew by, and apparently this game is racist because there's no black ghosts. Many of which disturbed the player or caused anger. This ghost is causing me anger. The ghosts were the only things on the screen other than the background, so the player decided to fire a stream of bullets at the ghost. Yeah, because I'm sure bullets plus ghost, that works. The bullets killed many of the ghosts. Well, I guess I'm wrong. Causing the player to hear screams of pain and panic. My favorite screams. The stage had more ghosts further on, insulting and mocking the player more. The voices weren't coming from the headset, they were coming straight from the player's mind, which makes about as much sense as anything in this stupid story. Screams could be heard from both the headset and the play, but I thought you said that they weren't coming from the headset! Okay. And were especially unnerving. Eventually, the cat from the previous stage appeared again, meowing the same bone-freezing sound. Ooh. Must have icy breath. This time, the cat had much more powerful attacks, and was joined by morbid-looking fairies who cry blood from their black, empty eyes. You might want to see a doctor for that. I'm no cardiologist. The player was dreading the cat's... dreading... Okay. But could hear what they believed to be the cat's thoughts. Whatever, sure. Let's just go along with it. The player dodged the later attacks perfectly based on the information they heard from the cat. This video's going on a half an hour. Why? Okay. But yeah, he's dreading the cat. The player, by the end, the dialogue from Sealed Rose was seen. Oh boy. Hurry to me! Reimu had no dialogue, not even the blank for the player to speak. When the player shouted, it seemed unheard. The player didn't even try to escape the game, even though you could just turn it off right now. But... where was I? The player didn't even want to escape the game. They were so invested in how odd the game was acting. They just wanted to reach the end. The curiosity is always the downfall of these stupid creepypasta writers. You guys are idiots! Oh my gosh. Okay, let's get back to the story. You don't even know where I am. They wanted to reach the end and hopefully know what was going on. The dreaded text appeared, saying, "You shall receive eternal torture." The background started pitch black and faded to a violent, fiery landscape with magma flowing over it. Okay. Bodies were being shoveled into the fire as more were delivered by the giant, horrible-looking creatures that were half human and half animal. It did not look like the normal animal people of Touhou. Touhou doesn't even have that. They don't have animal people, really. I guess it was that wolf girl in 14. Okay, maybe that's a few. But... So guys, I'm not a furry. They're not... I'm just gonna... But they were much more animalistic and frightening to look at. This author is like he's a coward. Like, he's scared of literally everything in this game. And this isn't even a scary game. And the name of the music for the stage didn't disappear as it did on the other stages. That might get annoying dodging stuff. But the music was giving the fitting name of Hellfire Mantle. That's the name of the song in the game. Raven swarmed the player in the game, luckily only taking one life. Well, I guess they called it I was gonna say a murder, but a murder's crows and they're ravens. And yeah, that was my bad. That didn't work. And being more of a nuisance than a threat to the player's progress. My cat's meow was heard again, but when it jumped in, it instantly fell into a dark gap that was only there for a short instant. Reimu said her dots, but the player had nothing to say. Nothing at all. A new mystery person with said, "No need to thank me, honorable opponent." The player was very confused, but had no time to be distracted, as the background became a starry void as the final boss flew in. A large raven flew in. It had bright red reptile-like eyes because ravens are my favorite reptiles. And a small luminous orb was orbiting around. Around what? We don't know. Scientists are still studying this. The raven spoke in a deep but still female voice, saying, "I finally found you." It's the deepest female voice I can do. Dialogue between the player and the raven didn't give much explanation for the game. The raven only told the player that Satori Komiji was a creature known as a Satori. Real original. Doesn't even Japanese mythological creature. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, because the game's okay. And the owner of the cat and the... Yeah, that's the... Oh my gosh, that's just stupid. The raven didn't know anyone named Sealed Rose and had no knowledge of the other stages. What the had no knowledge of the other stages. What the player had seen. Okay. Except what she already knew of the Satori and the raven then finished the dialogue with, "Enough talk, comma, my new master wants you to suffer." Ooh. This is really my voice. The raven attacked with a blast of blinding bright light as opposed to that blinding dark light and deafening explosions. It was as if the computer settings had been manually changed to maximum brightness and sound. Unlike Satori or the cat, the player was focusing on intimidation through monstrous strength and dazzling displays of how small and helpless the player was. As intimidating as the attacks were for the player, as a person, they didn't feel like they were in any danger. The effects took enormous what? Oh, look, I'm stupid. The effects looked enormous that was my bad. Compared to the tiny Reimu sprite, the player could the player, they only looked big because it took up 2/3 of their 14 by 9 inch screen. I'm glad we know the specifications of their monitor. The story could not do without it. The player could feel the heat and... Sure, whatever. I don't even care anymore. Yeah, sure, feel the heat. Here's the magnitude of the explosions and almost fell over in the chair. Sure, whatever. The only thing the player could imagine... but the only thing the player could imagine was... Imagine if losing all their lives or lost was the game itself, which could be replayed at any time. Satori did frighten the player with her odd ability to recreate spells that the players thought about, and the cat at first seemed to leap off the screen with how real it sounded, because, yeah, you can put a sound of the cat meowing and it sounds real. But after the same pot, the player realized that they were never in any real danger. Oh, really now? Almost like it wasn't real, it doesn't matter. The player was unsure if the game really was coming to life, or it was just a genius This guy's an idiot. Player still didn't want to lose after coming this far, and took the Raven's attempt as intimidation as a challenge to beat the final boss at the moment. As the... Guys, it's almost 40 minutes. Can't do this. As the battle went on, the player began to sweat and was playing better than they had in any other game, Touhou or otherwise. Player noticed the Raven was starting to use larger and larger spells that looked impressive but couldn't slow the player from winning. Hey. In a desperate move, I'm tired. In a desperate move for the final spell, the Raven began to suck in the player's character into what seemed to be a black hole, inside of which was the Get a load of this. The blackest darkness. The blackest darkness. Can't make this up. Yeah, it was the blackest darkness I've ever seen. The blackest darkness the player's ever seen. As if not even the computer's screen in that area was giving off light. This spell intrigued the player in how a simple game could stop the computer's natural lighting. Which still wasn't supposed to stop to the beat the game. After finishing the final boss, the player got their lives back. Don't lie, you don't have a life. And the game seemed to end. Keyword seemed, because the story doesn't! Ignoring the ending scenes, because thank goodness, the player was beginning to calm down. The horrifying idea of a self-aware game became distant by now. The player had conquered a great deal of, a great obstacle that at first seemed impossible to beat. At the time, the player still didn't understand how the game could pull at them so much, but imagine it was all just programming that in no way affected them. Yeah, even though the game literally read your mind and you were talking to it. It was late. Player was tired. I'm tired. And wanted to sleep on the ideas of how the game came to exist. I want to sleep on the idea of how this story came to exist, bro. And how it was made so perfectly. Sure. But when the player tried to get up from their chair, they couldn't. Because they were so fat! They couldn't. My mom's probably going to be mad at me because I'm being really loud, but... As hard as the player tried to lift themselves out of the chair, it felt as if a dark energy was holding them in because that's how chairs work. Leaving so soon, text said. The player quickly pressed the escape key many times with no results, and the player didn't even bother to press the power button on their computer. But they couldn't. As hard as the player tried, lift them. Oh wait, I already read that. The player then tried Control Alt Delete, but nothing changed. Even as the player held their computer's power. Oh, finally! You tried the power button after all this time. Their help was stop the game. Could only stare at the screen. The game loaded the extra stage. Oh boy. Up to this point, the player had felt like a hero when playing. Oh, you're a real hero sitting at your keyboard. Yeah. As if they could take on anything the game could throw at them and walk away at any time without the slightest threat of physical injury. Well, it's a video game. What games are you playing? What am I doing? What am I doing with my life? Why am I doing this? Now, they were, without a doubt, scared. Shirtless. Scared shirtless, because that's what it says. I'd say it, but I don't... Not only were they physically stuck in front of their computer, they still couldn't pause or quit, but the game was meant to end after stage 6, like it did in all games. They didn't press the extra start button. I bet he's gonna be like, man, this game's programming is really well done. It trapped me in the chair. I wonder how he did that. They didn't press the extra start option. Player was also on normal. Extra stages were on par with lunatic difficulty, the hardest in any game they were in. As the player's character slowly scrolled up the stage's bloody stone background with no music but ambient sounds of winds and screams of fear. The only things seen were murmuring ghosts and zombie fairies crying blood. Oh, you love to see it. Both of which the player knew better than to shoot at, which, well, that sounds like something you definitely would shoot at, but what do I know? Sounds of ghosts were heard normally. Yeah, I hear ghosts. It's pretty normal. And not from inside the player's head. Sure about that, buddy? They were still just as nervous-wrenching. What? But they were still just as oh my gosh. Nerve-wrenching! After what seemed to be an eternity of soft and paralyzing background music, the boss appeared. Welcome, now we can truly play. And the boss was a young girl. Oh, who would have thought? A Touhou game with young girls? No way. Like Satori, but a few inches shorter and wearing a green skirt. Yeah, that's the description. Oh my God, I've said this a million times. You're just describing things that are in the game. It's a flowery design and yellowish orange shirt with black inside. With a black inside. I'm sorry. It had a black sun hat with a blue rose bowl placed on it. Her hair was grayed. You mean grayed green? You mean dyed green? How do you grade? It would be gray. Am I stupid? Whatever. She was turned away from the player with her eyes closed, and she had a third eye similar to Satori, but it was colored blue and tightly closed with spite. I closed my eyes with spite, too. Reimu said her blanks once more, meaning the player was allowed to speak. Why are you doing this? Which the I'm tired. Extra stage boss answered, you deserve to suffer, comma. They all do too. Wrong too. That's T-O. You need another O. Player responded with, what have they done? They insulted my friendship, you insulted my companionship, and you've all insulted me in your thoughts. I know you have. The player wondered what she meant. He didn't remember saying anything hurtful to the boss, nor to the mysterious sealed rose. I never said any insults to you. I didn't even think anything harmful. The girl hastily and angrily replied, I know what humans think. I've read their thoughts and only saw hatred and cruelty. I may have given that power up, but I will never forget the hate I heard from their selfish minds. Who programmed you? Asked the player, hoping to get reassurance this was still only a game, because, yep, games can trap you in your chair. Program me? Ignorant human, you really don't understand what has entered your pathetic machine, comma, do you? Who are you? The player asked. The player turned around and opened her emerald green eyes. Her third eye was not opening at all. Another name appeared on screen. Replied, my name is Kiyoshi I can't pronounce Komiji, that's it. But I also like the name Sealed Rose. Oh my gosh, she was Sealed Rose the whole time? Sealed Rose! Oh my gosh. It's getting deep. Kiyoshi's sinister theme began, titled Hartman's Yokai Girl. Yep, that's the name of the song. No matter how hard the player dodged, the player was losing badly. Yoshi didn't just make confusing designs. Many consciously named at the player's location. Oh my gosh, almost like it's a boss fight. Yeah, and as the player was beginning to find a way to survive, when the player was on their last life, Kiyoshi shot an oddly colored life token that the player had no chance to avoid. Player's last life changed colors from a white star to a pale blue heart. Oh, man. From then on, whenever the player would die again, the character would flash for half a second, and the player would feel realistic pain on their skin as opposed to all that unrealistic pain I feel on my skin. I stubbed my toe and that pain was so unrealistic. Kyoshi's spells weren't even trying to hit the player while playing the game, but more to torture them mentally as they tried to avoid them. In one spell, The knives would ease on the character, causing the player to anticipate the pain but still try to resist, while dodging Kyoshi's other bullets. When touched by any of the knives, the player felt scratches and stabbing pains on their skin. I didn't know I'm doing this. I'm so fed up with all this crap. At times, Kyoshi was invisible and couldn't be harmed, semicolon. All that could be seen were 2 points that looked like eyes staring blankly into the player's soul. The player was starting to bleed where cuts had overlapped, but was too focused on preventing new wounds to pressure on the ones that were bleeding. The player felt as they would fade from the... I feel like I'm about to faint. From the mental and physical stress, but suddenly the character disappeared into a black gap, like the one that swallowed the cat, and reappeared in another location. The player was given the we're almost done, guys. Was given the message, supernatural border. Like Trump's wall. The player was no longer feeling pain, but didn't seem to get damage from Kyoshi's bullets. The player was able to win, defeating Kyoshi, but still unsure any what was happening was possible, and again questioning the events of the past stages. Ray moves, dots, there's a bunch of dots. Text appeared again in the boss dialogue. Player asked, "Who are you?" Hoping for someone to respond. Text appeared in a sweet voice. Player read and heard, "The one behind the spiriting away. The border is mine, period." What? It's over. It's over. I gotta tell you, that was one of the most confusing and stupid things. Half of that wasn't even a creepypasta. It was literally just describing stuff that happened in the game. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It wasn't scary, it was stupid. The whole concept made no sense. His computer was possessed and he could... it was kind of an interesting concept, be able to talk in the game, I guess, but... it was stupid and wasn't done very well and didn't go into much detail. The ending didn't make any sense at all. If you made it this far, I commend you for wasting your life watching this. And this is Pastas with Sauce, and I'm out.